I'll turn out Ruth Bader Ginsburg, which is obviously the biggest news of the weekend. Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away. She has served on the Supreme Court for a long, long time. But I want to hit an angle on Ruth Bader Ginsburg that on this show that really ties in with one of the main themes I try to talk about in the show all the time. Every American has the duty in every generation, if you understand the unique greatness of America, if you understand the importance of the founding ideas of America, every American has the duty in their generation, and we in our generation, to preserve and protect the idea of America. And that includes the structure of our court systems. And I want to talk about all of the arguments being made at this moment since Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed on. So now we only have 8 justices on the Supreme Court. We have an election coming up November 3rd. And here we are, little past between the middle and the end of September. And you're hearing voices on the left saying that President Trump, that it would be absolutely outrageous if he were to nominate someone. And voices on the right, including President Trump, saying, of course I'm going to nominate someone and try to get him through the Senate confirmed before the November election. I'm going to make like 4 points, and these are things I hope you'll take with you and be able to pass along to people who say that there's something wrong with the idea that President Trump would nominate someone or that he would nominate a conservative. To start with, the Constitution, all of its brilliance, says the way you get justices on the Supreme Court is the president must nominate. No one else has that power. The president must nominate, and the Senate has a right to advice and consent. The Senate can say yes or no to whoever is nominated, and the Senate can decide to hold a hearing or not hold a hearing. This is the power of the majority, and the structure set up by the Constitution really perpetuates, it enables the government of we the people. Because we the people choose the president through elections, and we the people choose who has the majority in the Senate. And at this time, the Republicans have the White House with President Trump, and the Republicans have a bare, thin majority in the Senate. The system was set up to permit, to function under its rules. There's nothing unfair about everyone involved in the process following the Constitution's rules. There's nothing unfair, nothing unjust, nothing irrational. In fact, it's the only way to have a fair system is to follow the Constitution. Otherwise, you just have political parties making demands and saying, we don't care what the Constitution says, you can't make a nomination or you can't hold a vote. The Constitution protects everyone in exactly the same way. It is the epitome of equal rule under law, of one law for everyone. It's the epitome of that. If all of the dynamics were the same and the Democrats have the White House and the Democrats have the Senate, they'd be clamoring to get the next justice in to replace whoever just passed on, because they want to make sure that they can do what they've been elected to do as soon as they can. But you're hearing arguments saying that somehow unjust that President Trump is considering nominating someone because the election is so close, and people, that is absurd and idiotic. The system calls for the process I just told you, and there's no limitation on the timing of that process. So I want to show you some quotes, but just a little bit of open your eyes about how there's so much noise coming out of the left. So much noise coming out of the left, trying to act indignant and outraged. I'll tell you more in a moment what some of the leftists have been saying. But so much noise about the idea that it would be outrageous if President Trump nominates someone. So I have some. This is our happy little quick who said this thing. And Matt, the wonderful, is going to put it up right now. Okay, so special Q&A, who said this? In response to the question whether the Senate should hold a confirmation hearing for a newly nominated Supreme Court justice in a presidential election year, who said that's their job. There's nothing in the Constitution that says the president stops being president in his last year. And the answer is Ruth Bader Ginsburg. July 2016, when Obama wanted to get a vote on Merrick Garland. But Obama the Democrats held the White House, but the Republicans held the Senate. And the Republicans said we're not holding a hearing because we don't have to, because they have that power under the Constitution. So Ruth Bader Ginsburg herself said, Nothing in the Constitution says president stops being president. When Democrats wanted the GOP-controlled Senate to vote on President Obama's SCOTUS nominee, Merrick Garland, Ginsburg was all for it. Next question. Who said this? And this is about whether it matters that the Supreme Court enters the post-election season without a full bench. 8 is not a good number for a collegial body that sometimes disagrees. What do? What we do is automatically affirm the decision of the court below. The point of this is if you have only 8 justices, you have 4-4, liberal or conservative, you can't really get decisions because you're going to have the split like that. No opinions written, no reasons are given, and the affirmance has no presidential value. It's just as though we denied review. So it's a huge lament on behalf of the idea that you can't go forward without a full bench. And who said that? Ruth Bader Ginsburg. During an event at the Smithsonian Museum of American History, again in 2016, a few months later. Next quick quote, who said, "I think we hope there will be 9 justices on the Supreme Court as quickly as possible." And that answer was Sonia Sotomayor, another Supreme Court Democrat-nominated Supreme Court justice, basically saying the same thing. You need to have a full Supreme Court as soon as possible. And the other reason, my very fine friends, we should all want to have a full Supreme Court is because once the fall elections happen, do not think we're going to have a clear answer. I tell you, if we have honest elections, I feel sure President Trump will win, probably in a landslide. But we're going to have battles over mail-in ballots. We're going to have battles over all sorts of legal issues. You're going to have the left clamoring, if President Trump wins, clamoring to somehow call him invalid. And you can't move forward if you don't have a full complement on the Supreme Court capable of issuing a 5-4 ruling. So it is garbage for the left to claim that there's something wrong with the idea of President Trump nominating someone right now. Even Ruth Bader Ginsburg said so. But the other point I want to make, the big point I want to make about Ruth Bader Ginsburg is this. You will hear leftist organizations and alleged women's groups claiming that Ruth Bader Ginsburg was a trailblazer. She's practically a saint. She's an icon. She is someone to be revered. We're going to have to watch weeks and weeks of left-wing television telling us all the great specials on Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and who can possibly be more flowery and over the top in praising her. And I want to make a couple points about her. She was smart. And she had integrity, meaning she knew what she believed in. She was a radical leftist, and she was genuine. She pursued what she believed in. She was a radical leftist. And she was apparently a nice enough person to become close friends with Justice Antonin Scalia, which is another great tribute to her and to him. They could put aside ideological differences. They even went on vacation together with their respective spouses. The 4 of them went on vacations together. So yeah, they were friends. But Ruth Bader Ginsburg did not stand up for women. Do not let anyone tell you that Ruth Bader Ginsburg fought for women. Ruth Bader Ginsburg fought for radical leftism. And it's okay to say that. She's allowed to. She's allowed to have any radical views that she wants. But women in America do not have to succumb to the idiocy of the left saying, well, we all must honor Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She stood for women. No, she didn't. No, she didn't. She stood for radical leftism, and she happened to be a woman. There are men as radical leftists as she is, and those people are also standing up for leftism, not women. But I want to tell you some things I learned about her, about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, on her passing. I mean, I will tell you, I understand she's going to lie in state at the Capitol or at the Supreme Court for, I think, Wednesday and Thursday or something. They're going to properly honor her. She served on the court, and she did what she was called to do. But I want to tell you a few things you may not know about her. One huge one was, when I say she's a radical leftist, I am not exaggerating. She may have been diminutive, she's very tiny, and people thought she was kind of humorous, and she's a very popular speaker at left-wing events. She was a radical leftist. Let me just tell you a few things about her. She wrote a book, she co-wrote a book with a woman named Brenda Fagan-Fastow. But Ruth Bader Ginsburg co-wrote a book in 1977 called Sex Bias in the U.S. Code. It was basically a radical feminist review of the entire system of federal laws, reviewing the federal code to assess whether or not the federal laws had sexism in them. This is the age of radical feminism, challenging sexism, and what they claim was sexism. So she wrote this book, and it was, she had written it long before she was nominated and accepted. She was nominated, I think, like 93 to the Supreme Court. So she wrote this book in 1997. Let's tell you a couple of things that she said. This is Ruth Bader Ginsburg, her writing, her book. Number one, the overarching claim coming out of the book was that there were at least 800 federal laws that discriminated based on sex. Let me tell you that some of them were. She said women should be drafted just like men are drafted. So if the draft for women, draft for men. One idea underlying this is if you're really a radical feminist, you try to claim there's absolutely no difference between men and women. I mean, you can't acknowledge any difference. You can't acknowledge any difference, such as, average strength, average ability to athletically to run, to lift, to be strong. You can't acknowledge that differences, which clearly exist here in the world of reality, you can't acknowledge those. So she's complaining that the draft should draft women as it drafts men. And she went on to say that affirmative action should be applied for women in the armed services, that we had to start, and she also said women had to be assigned to military combat duty. So she wants women as well as men in the military, which, I actually say, as a little aside, Israel has a program where everybody goes, men and women, everybody must serve. When you get to, I think you're age 19 or something, you have to go serve in the armed services. They don't pretend that women are men. They assess individuals, and the time period is shorter for women. I'm not against women in the military. I have some women friends who love serving in the military. I think it's great. Ruth Bader Ginsburg could not deal with the reality that men and women are different. So she said we have to have affirmative action in the military till we get men and women, the same numbers, into these positions, battle positions, other positions involving what is needed for men for strength in order to defend our country. She went on to say, she also said the age of consent, this is Ruth Bader Ginsburg, age of consent for sexual acts must be lowered to 12 years old. She's offended by the idea. There was a phrase in many laws that said essentially, carnal knowledge of any female, not your wife, who hasn't attained the age of 16 years. She was offended. And again, laws like that to protect women, because as we all know, most men are stronger than most women. Most women, far more than men, are going to be the victims of sexual assault. Women, more than men, far more likely to be victims of rape and any other sexual violence, because it just ties with the laws of nature, with the reality of life. And so laws over the years had talked about it was illegal it made a crime for men to have carnal knowledge with a woman who was under 16, unless it was her wife, and she found that sexist and offensive. Instead of saying, hey, this is great, we're protecting women from violent men. Couldn't get there. She also said prostitution should be legalized. Prostitution should be legalized. She says not even sufficient to change the law. Prostitution laws obviously were written mainly for women who were selling the services, and so the laws referred to women engaged in prostitution. It wasn't enough to her to say, well, let's have men and women, both be possibly prosecuted for prostitution. Not enough. She wanted all the prostitution laws gone. In fact, she talked about there's a growing national movement recommending unqualified decriminalization of prostitution as sound policy based on equal rights and individual privacy principles. So, okay, a huge one she wanted changed because she found it offensive to women was called the Mann Act, M-A-N-N, not referring to a man versus woman, but a person's name, capital M, man. This is the law that prohibits the transportation of women and girls for prostitution, debauchery, or other immoral purposes. She's offended that there's a federal law, obviously, because you sometimes have, you talk about today our knowledge of sex trafficking, you have young girls, very young girls and teenage girls trafficked, moved across state lines to provide, often against their will, to provide sexual services. This law is designed to make it the crime. One of the crimes that are being committed by the handlers, by the creepy people who do this to women. was a law that said, yeah, you can get prosecuted for transporting females, women or girls, for prostitution, debauchery, or other immoral purposes. That had to go. Not okay with her because, you know, what, you're treating women like they're victims. Well, obviously they were victims, you know, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. That's why we have the laws. She also said we had to end in prisons and reformatories. We must end sex segregation. So she wants sex integrated prisons and reformatories. So men and women in together. What could go wrong there? Just try to think of what could go wrong. I can't imagine what. I mean, I could read you the rest of this show, the level of idiocy in her thinking. I understand she was a brilliant woman. She was very smart. She did really well in school. She was a radical leftist with radical feminist ideas, and she sat on the Supreme Court for a long time and issued decisions based on those views. She didn't stand up for women. She stood for radical leftism. And it's okay that she did. You can be a radical leftist in this country, but women trying to tell other women in this country that we have to stand and salute and canonize Ruth Bader Ginsburg because she stood for women. No, she didn't. She stood for radical leftism. She was an accomplished woman. She's intelligent, an accomplished judge, obviously, serving the Supreme Court. She was a radical leftist. And the idea that we're going to have to argue about whether or not this is her seat, another argument the left is using, that this is her seat, to honor her, we must replace that seat with someone who shares her values. No, no. Back to the Constitution. The Supreme Court openings get filled. They get filled by the process the Constitution set up. And for those of you saying, but what about 2016? What about when Antonin Scalia passed away and President Obama wanted to nominate Merrick Garland? Democrats have the White House. President Obama makes a nomination. Republicans hold the majority in the Senate, and they decline to hold a hearing. This, my friends, is called following the Constitution. There is no obligation for the Senate to hold a hearing. They just simply decided they weren't going to do it. They were not going to replace the brilliance and the conservatism and the constitutional integrity of the term served by Antonin Scalia by anyone who's going to be nominated by President Obama. This is the way the system worked. It worked exactly as it should have. The people, we the people, gave the Republican the majority in the Senate in 2016, which is why they were able to say, not going to give President Obama this nominee, not going to give him a hearing, because obviously everyone knows whoever sits in that seat in the Supreme Court, you know, you end up, many of them, for decades long. It's a very long-term position. We've discussed other times ideas people have about shortening it, but that's how it is right now. You are seated for life as you are in any federal bench seat. And so this is a huge decision, and I'm very, very grateful to hear that Mitch McConnell has said, you know, we're going to try to have a hearing. A couple of points in wrapping up today's show on this topic. One is that the left is, of course, galvanized out of their minds with the idea that they're going to somehow stop this nomination from going forward, that they're going to do every trick in the book to stop the nomination from going forward. And so you had AOC, and by the way, AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and Senator Schumer doing a press conference on this momentous topic, and they're wearing masks and talking into the microphone through a mask. I mean, just so pathetic looking. But back to this point, AOC and Schumer are saying they are going to, and Schumer urged unprecedented action over the Supreme Court. AOC is talking about using every tool at our disposal. Gerald Nadler, also a member of the U.S. House, Democrat radical nut, talked about if this happens, then the Senate should move. If this happens, if Trump nominates and the Senate holds a hearing, confirms we have somebody up there, that if Biden wins, that Biden ought to first move right away. The Democrats should move to pack the court. There's also Nancy Pelosi floating ideas saying, you know, maybe we're just going to have to find another ground for impeachment. I mean, they're actually talking about trying to stop him in every way they can. So please listen to my final point on this topic. The reason the left is out of their minds about this is because President Trump is going to nominate someone who will actually follow the Constitution. This is all the left is upset about. It's not about, you could pick 1,000 issues, including abortion, but even the abortion issue, which drives so much of radical leftism, is a question about, do we have a Supreme Court that follows the Constitution, or do we have a court that essentially legislates, that makes things up, that does not feel constrained by any sense of the limitations that are constitutionally placed on the judiciary? It's really about as simple as that. The Democrats are out of their minds because the Supreme Court may end up with a majority who actually follow the Constitution. They can't stand that. The left in this country has made major headway on major left-wing policies by getting decisions out of the Supreme Court that have no basis in the Constitution, no basis in law. They have a basis in the decisions the left wanted, the policies they wanted, and finding judges to sit on courts who will escape from, ignore the concept of constitutional originalism or textualism and go down the path of, I don't know, Ruth, what do you think this should be? Well, I don't know, John, I'm thinking about this. The Supreme Court has really fallen off in many ways, and in decisions that have gone with the majority of the leftists on the court. They're not decisions based on actual interpretation of the Constitution. They're decisions made by leftist activism by those judges. And this is a chance President Trump has to put in place a potentially stronger majority on the Supreme Court. We'll leave Justice John Roberts out of this at this time because he's who even knows what he's going to do. But I want to close out by saying this is of massive consequence to America. Do not, my very fine friends, my women friends who listen to this show, do not get duped into thinking we have to honor Ruth Bader Ginsburg's alleged last words saying, well, she said, my last dying wish is I really hope President Trump doesn't appoint someone until after the elections. It doesn't matter what she thought. It wasn't her seat. It doesn't matter what she thought. Who even knows if she said it? Even if she did, it doesn't matter. She doesn't decide who is the next person to hold the seat. The constitutional process does. And back to 2016, the leftists, as you saw from Ruth Bader Ginsburg a moment ago, her statement, she's all about, of course the Senate should move with immediate haste. Let's go, chop, chop, hold a hearing. Because she hoped that they could get the Democrat nominee through the Republican majority Senate, and they weren't going to do it. The process worked then, the process is working now. The Constitution's process is our only safeguard against the tyranny, and it's amazing to think about what the left is wanting more than anything else is more and more justices on the Supreme Court who will simply ignore the constitutional limitations on the role of the judiciary and will be the activist kind of judges who push leftist policies. When you hear President Trump talking about nominating someone of a conservative background, conservative thinking, he's talking about someone who will stand up for the Constitution, which, my very fine friends, is the only way we keep the structure and stability of this country, is holding on to the way the Constitution works and was meant to work.